freight efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roche and Friends.
Here in episode 97, we have joining us Michele Calbi, CEO of Team DriveAway, where she talks about her experiences moving a fleet from 5.2 to 7.2 miles per gallon, and about the importance of including drivers in the fuel economy equation. She also talks about what got her into trucking and how she has enjoyed her time working at a fleet and at various other companies. In particular, she shares some of the options for moving trucks from the OEM assembly plants to their final destination, including the new challenges of delivering battery electric ones and hydrogen fuel cell trucks. Today we have joining us Michele Calbi. She's a Chief Executive Officer at Team DriveAway. Excited to chat with you today, Michele. This is going to be a lot of fun, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
As I ask all my guests, it's required, Michele, that they're friends, and you're friends. So let's start with, do you remember how we met and became friends?
Yeah, it was quite some years ago, and it was when I was at Swift Transportation. We were talking about the super truck. That's when it was first announced, and how can we all get involved in it, and considering how can we contribute, especially creating the fuel efficiency in that particular vehicle through aerodynamics and engine setup and that sort of thing. And around that same time, Swift was awarded the Cummins Global Six Sigma Award for MPG improvement. So for us, it just fit perfectly. And our discussion continued when I moved on to Navistar. And then at that point, you asked me to join the NACFE board, and it was really exciting times.
Yeah, I remember us having a board meeting in Savannah, Georgia, where you were there. Yeah, it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I always come up with these ideas and stories and things to talk about on the podcast. And then occasionally I stop myself and say, well, we better not go there. There's something either Michele or I may not want to share with everybody. But yeah, so remind me, when would that have been at Swift, and what was your role at Swift?
I was vice president of all of the shops, operations, procurement, and a big push with Lean and Six Sigma. And at that time, fuel was above $5 a gallon, diesel fuel. So there was a sense of urgency to be able to change up our fleet, change up the way we handled fuel and how our drivers were driving. And it really was all-encompassing in the company, because it was so significant with the number of power units we had, which was well over 20,000 power units. So it took a team that was dedicated, and the results were really quite amazing. We were able to take the fleet from 5.26 to 7.2 miles per gallon, and that's quite a leap.
Wow. I continue to watch Swift. One of the ways that we sort of judge, this is sort of almost anecdotally, but sort of judge a fleet's commitment to fuel efficiency is if they keep their speed down. So in those times of, one of the ways to improve MPG is to just slow down if you can. And a lot of trucks can, more trucks than we think. We think we got to move the freight, and the drivers get paid by the mile. So everybody wants to go faster, but it's not always required. So, a lot of fleets lowered their miles per hour to save fuel back in those days. And then, as times changed and fuel came down a bit off of that $5 peak, then many fleets turned the trucks back up and got the, cruise and maximum cruise higher. But I think Knight Swift and a few others have stayed lower in speed. And, that just tells us that, there's a long-term real commitment to efficiency.
You're correct on that. When we did our studies, we determined that 30% was driver responsibility. And that meant slowing down at a further distance from where they may have to stop at a light. And then when they excelled, let's say entering the freeway, to excel in a particular manner through the gears to maximize. And then we did a lot of work on setting up our engines properly to maximize the MPG, but still give them enough power so that, they're not lagging or causing an unsafe condition. But we had one driver who was well over 9 MPG. So of course, we asked him about his best practices, and these were the things that he told us. And he said, every week I just play games to see if I can improve my MPG. And he was very successful.
Yeah, it's so fun. We've had 4 run on less events. The first 2 were really into long haul and regional haul, where a lot of that came up. I remember, lots of the drivers telling us some of those tricks. I mean, we had a female driver with Meijer in Michigan and Ohio, Meijer, the grocery store chain,
Yeah.
and she was really working the let me see if I can get this right. The gap between vehicles in front of her and her truck and these really advanced cruise controls. And, I think it's either by seconds following distance or distance in feet. I can't remember, but she was doing a lot of experimentation on what was the right setting for her, both feeling safe driving the truck, but also getting the best fuel economy. And it wasn't always being closest, because then you end up with more, getting off the cruise and, braking and going. And so, little things like that can make a huge difference.
It's important that drivers are aware of how they're managing that vehicle. And in DriveAway, our drivers are in all different sorts of vehicles. They can be in a Class 8 truck, to a fracking truck, to a mixer. And so it's not as though they drive that same truck, same setup. So they really have to be aware. And we do want our drivers to save on fuel. It helps the customer, it helps us, and obviously it helps the economy.
Yeah.
So we do encourage this being safe, but also be aware of the fuel usage.
Okay, so what got you into trucking? You've been in the business for a while. I'm not so sure. I won't ask you your age, Michelle, or anything like that. But when you started, there were less women interested in the trucking profession as drivers or in the office, fleets in particular, but other companies. So how'd you get into it, and why?
So my family was into cars, and my dad and brother, they used to overhaul these muscle cars. And one of them, I remember sitting there watching. I was very fascinated in what they were doing. It was a Nomad, if anybody recognizes that model of vehicle. And after they got done with it, that was a powerhouse. I thought it was really amazing. And so I drove a Mustang during high school, and a Mustang, the old classics. And I do have an old classic car that I've had since 1981. And I just love it. I'm just very automotive trucking based. And I really enjoyed being at Swift because I got to spec the trucks and trailers. And I just like that. I think it's fascinating on how to put things together to maximize MPG, maximize efficiency, those sort of things. So after automotive, and my first role was with DeLorean Motor Company in warranty. So that was quite the experience.
Oh, wow.
It was very, very interesting. When it closed down the next day, I started at Mitsubishi Motor Sales when it was a startup with 35 employees. So that was a lot of fun and very challenging to get the company up and running. And then moved on to Toyota Motor Sales, and I was there for over 13 years. And that's really where I learned lean. They didn't call it that. Learned Six Sigma. It was just part of the culture. And then I moved on to joining Daimler, which at that time was more known as Freightliner. And we integrated Western Star and Thomas Built Bus. So it was exciting times. And when Sterling was part of the family from Ford, and just enjoyed what I was doing. And again, found trucking very fascinating. And once you're in the trucking industry, Mike, you're hooked. You're not going to leave it.
Yeah,
So
you are. And, it's just fascinating to me, Michelle. I mean, I think, I brought up that, over my career, which is almost 40 years now, I've seen an increase in women. The other thing that I think you're a great example of, that we're seeing more of today than we did in the past decades is, moving from company to company and gaining the expertise and understanding the industry from, kind of a 360-degree perspective. When I started, the advice was always, find yourself a big company, get in, get the pension, stay with them, grow your I don't know, grow your responsibility and pay by staying somewhere a long time. And now with 401ks and no pensions and this, that, and the other, there's a lot more movement. But I think for me, what I've learned, and guests like you, I always try to bring things up that I think I've learned, and that is, again, if you can stay in the industry, you're hooked in trucking like I am, but then you've been able to see it from a lot more perspectives, and that's really good. That really helps our work, and kind of the work that you're doing. It's any thoughts on that in particular? Any advice you'd give for the younger generation in trucking?
Yeah, thank you. When I was at Daimler and moved over to Swift, I really honestly believed I understood fleets. And within the first week, I realized how much I did not understand fleets. And so it was a huge learning curve. But when I moved over to Navistar with a quick stop in Navistar Defense, which was pretty exciting during the Middle Eastern War, and we were producing MRAPs and then switch back over to commercial, it gave me a different perspective. I had more appreciation for the fleets and brought that knowledge base to the company. And as it turned out, in one of my roles, I was teaching lean and helping dealerships, especially on the service drive and the parts department, just be more lean and smart and customer focused, and saving money, obviously, and being more solutions driven because I understood the customer. And then coming over to DriveAway, which honestly I didn't know existed at the time. And it's a fascinating business that is niche-y. It's behind the scenes, but once we're going to start talking about it, people are going to say, oh yeah, I was wondering how these trucks got from A to B, right? Well, it's DriveAway.
Yeah. Before we go there, what you said about fleets really resonates with me. I mean, NACFE, we've got a project that we've just kicked off where we're gonna survey a bunch of fleets on a certain topic, and we our partners in this work really wanted to understand the fleet's opinion. So for a few minutes or a few days, we were going to exclude everybody else and just talk to fleets. But what you brought up struck me in this project where, wait a minute, we all, make decisions on, design of our products, what we think the mix of the products are going to be in our production if you're a supplier, or, we all act like fleets to run our businesses.
Mhm.
We do TCO calculations. We do, what's residual value going to be? I mean, we go through all that. So, there's the fleets, and in our newsletter list, I think we've got like 1,500 fleets, and we've got 12,000 people. So the
Mhm.
point is that the fleets can tell you how they're going to make decisions, but really all the rest of us also know how fleets make decisions and can, give our opinions and times. So we're going to survey everybody in this project, Michelle, because everybody can give some perspective on how fleets think.
Yeah, I think it's smart to do that. And you will notice that fleets have their own strategies and decisions, from having a vehicle that is the most modern, high tech, to fleets that say, I only want this vehicle to last me 3 years. I'm going to spec it to the lowest denominator just to get through the 3 years because they can't afford the high technology. And, the other fleets are in between. So it'll be interesting for you to hear how they manage ordering and how they manage their MPG and fuel expense and so forth. So I'm interested in reading that. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so let's get into your current role. I mean, the company's DriveAway, and I love it when company names tell you what the hell they do and not the opposite. So I think you drive trucks away from manufacturing into an end use. And yeah, you mentioned it earlier. This is an area that most of us, just have not experienced. But you build a bicycle, a motorcycle, or even a car, and you can ship, you know, maybe 100 bikes, maybe 20 or 30 motorcycles, and maybe a dozen cars on one transport tractor trailer. Trucks are a lot bigger, and they just don't show up at the fleet or at a dealer sales lot. So tell us about the company. Tell us about what it does. What are some things that we should know about this work, but don't? Take us through what DriveAway does and what DriveAway is.
Yeah, I'll start out with the basics of DriveAway and then get into the more specifics of the company. But DriveAway also will move new and used vehicles, and it will move vehicles from cars all the way up to fracking equipment or these huge boom units where you need specific permits. And in this company, we have a broker division as well. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But the new vehicles, for instance, an OEM will say, okay, we have an RFQ and certain driveaways will win it. They will move singles, which is one truck at a time. They'll also move boom, which is, it looks like a semi-trailer in between, open, a flatbed, and it connects the first vehicle to the second vehicle. So that's called a boom load. And then there's decked or piggyback. So you see 2 trucks, 3 trucks, 4 trucks, and sometimes you'll see a tow vehicle on the back of those because the driver, once he drops the vehicles, he then gets back in his tow vehicle, and which would be, it could be a car, it could be a truck, to either move on to his next pickup and delivery or back home. So it's very convenient for the driver to do that. What's fascinating about decking is that the OEM has to know enough about these vehicles and how they should be decked. Sometimes you have different wheelbases, etc. And then they'll send out this order for these deck units, or they'll send them out to the decking facility and say, here's the production, we want them decked. And they will have one drop. Let's say you have one drop with 4 trucks. You could possibly have 4 drops with 4 trucks. So they need to be stacked where the first stop is the last truck. Make sense?
If it can, but I can imagine where wheelbase changes, or maybe I remember one area I got into this world during my career was on 6x2 versus 6x4 axles. So
Exactly.
yeah, many times with 6x4s with only one axle or one set of tires on the ground when they're decked like you're describing, you have to remove the inner axle prop shaft, or sometime I don't know if it's all of them, but some of them. Well, with 6x2s where that rear axle is a trailer axle, you no longer had to do that. So decking 6x2s were actually a little easier to do than 6x4. So it's always fascinating, this business. But yeah, go ahead.
It really is. And you think, oh, well, this happens fast. They deck them really quick. No, they deck them very slow. And they use hoist to deck, and they, like you say, remove axles, remove tires, do all sorts of things to make sure that they're secure and double checked for safety. So when they go down the freeway, everything is safe and the vehicles make it. But it is a slow process. And our decking facility, we were always looking for ways to be more efficient and stack quickly, that's safe, and get those vehicles back on the roads. A lot of thought went into the process of how to deck, and the thinking too about what goes where. Sometimes they'll just send 30 vehicles and you have to figure out, okay, how are we going to stack these? How are we going to deck these?
Yeah, so this might be a good place for me to ask you a question. I mean, we're, in the work we're doing at NACV, and really the whole industry is coming to the fact that we're going to have multi fuels, different engines in our trucks moving forward. So fast forward 10 years, you may very well have 4 or 5 of those decking tractors that you talked about. One being, well, worst case scenario, maybe, Michelle, you've got one that's diesel, one that's natural gas, one that's battery electric, and one's hydrogen fuel cells. So kind of blows your mind a little bit right there. But are you starting to need to move natural gas or electric trucks? And everything from what you're experiencing today, with what do you think how's that going to impact your business down the road?
Well, it's a good question, and it already has. So mid-2022, Transport Topics was talking about EV units and the strategies, and we had a meeting, and it was the go, no go meeting. Are we going to move EVs or not? And we decided, yes, we're going to move EVs. And we're going to be the best in the marketplace because we're going to learn about how to best move the EVs. There were some driveaways that said absolutely not. Vehicles are too expensive. The battery boxes are below the vehicle, too low. Ground clearance, it makes everybody nervous. But we said, nope, we're going to do this. So we can either move them through DriveAway, or we can move them through what's called our freight, FR8 broker division. So today, as it stands, we have a particular OEM and we move all of their EV units through our freight division because we learned how to do it without damaging. And we have carriers that we trust who understand EV units. We've also moved EV buses, which is pretty exciting. You think about the length and the batteries, and they're $400,000 a piece. So it's pretty serious. CNG, we have moved and they have been mixed. So we have seen them mix CNG as the base unit, but because of weight and so forth and configurations, you can't deck too many. But we have moved those for an OEM as well, and we moved them as single. The challenge with CNG is you can map out where you're going to fuel, but on the website, the hours aren't always accurate. And they don't always take the credit cards. And sometimes the weight is pretty significant. So it is challenging. LNG, because the driver has to be certified. When I was at Swift, we did some testing with LNG. Our drivers aren't certified, so we don't move LNG units unless they have temporary canisters where they don't have to refuel, and the miles are such that they can get to their destination without having to refuel.
Right.
The one
Right.
that the reason why I ran into you at ACT Expo recently was the hydrogen seminar that they had. Very interested in hydrogen. We have a major customer who proclaims that hydrogen is next up. And so we are trying to gain as much knowledge as we can and be in front of the hydrogen strategies of our OEMs. So, driveaways have to make the commitment to learn. We worked very, very closely with Frito-Lay for a number of weeks to move their EV units safely. And that was very intense. And we moved lots of units for them.
Yeah.
So it was successful.
What this makes me think about is, we get asked every week, if not every day, what's the total cost of ownership comparison of diesel today versus any of these alternatives, really, Michele, battery electric, biodiesel, renewable diesel, natural gas. So we get asked that all the time. And, one of the ways I like to answer it and the team is around, well, what is the situation today? What is it going to be in the next couple of years? And what is going to be longer term? And so I think that's really appropriate to this discussion. So when something's new, you may have to just deck it on a low boy or drive one vehicle. Well, if you're moving a vehicle many states, the cost to move one versus four is significantly higher, right? So that matters and gets put into, some TCO somewhere. Maybe the manufacturer is, taking some of that cost, or the end user fleet. But it's one of those maturations of the technology for later on being more cost effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do have to do the math on it, but we do know if you move more than one unit, right, piggyback, you're using the fuel for one vehicle. So the carbon footprint is smaller. And we do know the OEMs are looking at their carbon footprint and they are recording it. We needed to send in certain reports to them. So they had that information. One of the next frontiers, and we've been working with an OEM on this, is HVO, which is really, all of the versus fossil fuel, right? So that has to do with the hydro-treated vegetable oil. And there's a lot of research going on there. And one of the OEMs currently does the first fill.
Yeah. And so that's just, it's, again, it's another example of this industry being cooperative and working together for the best solution. So, Michele, we always run out of time so fast, but, kind of as we close, what is some of your, I mean, we're going through some tough, I avoided the term transformation for a long time, but we got a lot of transformative stuff from all these different fuels to connectivity and now AI and so many things. So, irrespective of the exact technology or challenge, what's some of your advice, having been through some of these changes over your career in trucking? What's your advice to all of us trying to, find our way through it and do it successfully?
I think there's a few things. First of all, embrace change. If you resist change, that's a problem because you're going to get left behind. But be smart about which change you're embracing. You really have to look at the cost benefit and where is the market going to make those decisions. But from a DriveAway perspective, number one is always, above everything else, stay safe. Make the right decisions. Do your trip inspection. Do everything correctly. And then create value. So we're trying to be as easy to do business with our customers and our drivers. So much so that we're changing our IT system, and we have a driver and a customer portal that we've created to do exactly that. You have to have a high level of customer service consistently. If you say you're going to pick up the vehicle, pick it up on the day that you say you're going to pick it up and deliver it. Stay current on trends, just like what you're pointing to, Mike. Reducing carbon, EV, CNG, hydrogen.
Of those things, the one that really stands out to me is, create value and help your customers. Make it easy for the customers to embrace the change. Michele, thank you so much for joining me. It's been both insightful and I think helpful to me and to others. Thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Rosen Friends.